Let me introduce myself. My name is Gordon PARR, ex-Brigadier Guards and international business. For the past decade, general interest guest speaker with the leading British and American cruise companies. I make PowerPoint presentations on my ex-regiment, the Household Cavalry, Royal Scandals, the Crimea War, the Charge of the Life Brigade, the Crusades, Victoria Cross, and Rhyme and Reason. A light-hearted look behind many of the words, sayings, quotes, and nursery rhymes of the English language. I aim to entertain, inform, and enlighten. I'm now pleased to present my abbreviated rendering of Sir Winston Churchill.
The battle of Britain is about to begin. Upon this battle depends the survival of Christian civilization. Upon it depends our own British life and the long continuity of our institutions and our empire. The whole fury and might of the enemy must very soon be turned on us. Hitler knows that he will have to break us in this island or lose the war. If we can stand up to him, all Europe may be freed, and the life of the world may move forward into broad, sunlit uplands. But if we fail, then the whole world, including the United States, including all that we have known and cared for, will sink into the abyss of a new dark age, made more sinister and perhaps more protracted by the lights of perverted science. Let us therefore brace ourselves to our duty, and so bear ourselves that if the British Empire and its commonwealths last for 1,000 years, men will still say, this was their finest hour.
You have been listening to the immortal words of Sir Winston Spencer Churchill, the greatest orator of his day, the greatest leader of the Second World War, the greatest statesman of his age, and viewed by the British people, the greatest Englishman of the 20th century. Winston Spencer Churchill, born at Blenheim Palace, eldest son of Randolph, nephew of the Duke of Marlborough, ancestor of John Churchill, victor of the Battle of Blenheim. His father Randolph was a brilliant politician and died at a young age of antisocial disease. His mother Jenny was a well-connected society beauty and mistress of Edward VII. She remarried again at the age of 63 years, a man 24 years her junior. Winston's ancestor, Sarah, wife of John Churchill, was a close friend of Queen Anne. She confided in the Queen. When John returned home from the wars, he pleasured me 3 times whilst still wearing his riding boots. Winston had an undistinguished education at Harrow, went to Sandhurst, and was commissioned in the 4th Hussars. He served in India and in the Sudan, and was present at the charge of Omdurman. Later, he had a number of adventures as a newspaper correspondent, was captured, and escaped. Churchill had a political career of over 60 years. Posts included Home Secretary, a position his father had held, Lord of the Admiralty, on 2 occasions, Chancellor of the Exchequer, and was twice Prime Minister. When canvassing in 1900, one of those who approached him stated, "Vote for you. I'd rather vote for the devil." To which Churchill responded, "Well, if your friend is not running, may I count on your support?" On Lord Charles Beresford, he said, when he got up, he didn't know what he was going to say. When he was speaking, he didn't know what he was saying. And when he sat down, he didn't know what he'd said. Lady Esther was at a dinner party with Winston and said to him, "If I were your wife, I'd poison your coffee." Winston's response, "If I were your husband, I'd drink it." Betty Braddock was the Labour MP for the Exchange Division of Liverpool, and she met Winston in the corridor of the House of Commons. She's reputed to have said to him, "Winston, you are drunk." His response, "Yes, madam, I am drunk, but in the morning I shall be sober, and you shall still be ugly." During a debate, a member of the opposition, wishing to speak, kept interrupting Winston. Winston's response, "I can understand the honourable members wishing to speak. He needs the practice." He was a painter of skill and painted under the name of Charles Murrin, and his work was exhibited in the Louvre. A very talented writer, his works included the Second World War and the history of the English-speaking people. On the affair of Edward and Mrs. Simpson, he described it as such, one of the greatest love affairs. He described Edward as a little man dressed up to the nines. When America entered the war, Churchill visited President Roosevelt, and now they'd never met. Shortly after Churchill's arrival, the president decided to make a surprise visit to Winston's suite in the White House. At the time, Churchill was in the bath. He heard that the president was visiting. Have the president come into the bathroom. On Roosevelt entering, Churchill emerged naked from the bath and facing the president said, "The Prime Minister of Great Britain has nothing to hide from the President of the United States." Churchill was invited to address the United States Congress, and in his speech he said, "I cannot but reflect that if my father had been American and my mother English, then I may still have got here earlier." In 1942, Churchill was visiting Ottawa, and in between meetings was asked if he would consent to having his photograph taken. He was not pleased, but agreed. A temporary studio was arranged. He posed and was smoking his landmark cigar. The photographer leaned over and grabbed his cigar. This annoyed Churchill greatly. However, the look he captured shows a defiant man and sent a very strong message to the Axis. I'd now like you to listen to part of Churchill's speech of 1943. This is regards to the Battle of Alamein, which he refers to as the Battle of Egypt.
We have not so far this war taken as many German prisoners as they have taken British. But these German prisoners will no doubt come in droves at the end, just as they did last time. I have never promised anything but blood, tears, toil,
and sweat. Now, however, we have a new experience. We have victory. A remarkable and definite victory. A bright gleam has caught the helmets of our soldiers and warmed and cheered all our hearts. The late Monsieur Venizelos observed that in all our wars, England, he ought to have said Britain, of course, England always wins one battle, the last. We seem to have begun rather earlier this time. General Alexander with his brilliant comrade and lieutenant, General Montgomery, has gained a glorious and decisive victory in what I think should be called the Battle of Egypt. Rommel's army has been defeated. It has been routed. It has been very largely destroyed as a fighting force. This is not the end. It is not even the beginning of the end. But it is perhaps the end of the beginning. Henceforward, Hitler's Nazis will be equally well armed, and perhaps even better armed troops. Henceforward, they will have to face, in many theaters, that superiority in the air which they have so often used without mercy against others, and of which they boasted all round the world. They were to be the masters, and which they intended to use as the instrument for convincing all other peoples that all resistance to them was hopeless. When I read, my lords and gentlemen, of the coastal road, crammed with the flying German vehicles, under the blasting attacks of the Royal Air Force, I could not but remember those roads of France and Flanders, crowded not with fighting men, but with their helpless refugees, women and children, fleeing with their pitiful barrows and household goods, on whom such merciless cruelty was wreaked. I have, my Lord Mayor, I trust, a humane disposition, but I must say I could not help feeling that what was happening, however grievous, was only justice grimly reclaiming her rights.
When Churchill and Roosevelt met for the Casablanca Conference in 1943, the Prime Minister expressed an interest to visit the Casbah. Now, this presented a security problem, and it was pointed out that this was an unhealthy place, and he made contact, an awful oriental disease, which he may pass on to the President. Wickedly, Churchill chose to play along and said, "So you think there's life in the old dog yet? I can assure you that even if I were to go to the Casbah and contact the disease which you have in mind, I shall be most unlikely to communicate it to the President." On being urged by a British diplomat to flatter the Free French leader, General de Gaulle, he said to the diplomat, "I shall kiss him on both cheeks, or if you would prefer, on all four." At the Yalta Four-Power Conference in 1944, Anthony Eden, the British Foreign Minister, passed a note to Churchill. The note said, A dead bird doesn't leave its nest. Churchill read the note and tossed it into the wastebasket. The Russians retrieved the note, suspecting that it may be a code, and this was passed to the KGB for deciphering. Despite great endeavours, it made no sense whatsoever. At the next meeting, Stalin asked Churchill, "What is the meaning of a dead bird doesn't leave the nest?" To which Churchill replied, "Oh, that! My foreign minister was telling me that my fly was open." At the same Yalta conference, Stalin stated, "All the Russian people want is peace in Europe." Churchill leaned over to Eden and said, "A piece of Poland, a piece of Hungary, a piece of Germany." During the North African campaign, the 8th Army captured the field commander of the Africa Corps, General von Thoma. Monty invited him to dinner in his trailer, and this horrified many at home. The Prime Minister's reaction was, "I sympathize with the German general, defeated, humiliated, in captivity, and dinner with Montgomery." Now, there's reputed to be a conversation between Churchill and George VI, and this is about Montgomery. So Churchill said to the king, "I'm worried about Montgomery. I think he's after my job." George VI's response, "That's a relief. I thought he wanted mine." During the war, Churchill was due to address the nation at 9 p.m. and decided to take a taxi. Churchill told the driver the destination. "Sorry, Gov, can't take you there. I've got to get home to listen to Winston's speech on the wireless." This pleased Winston greatly, so he gave the man a £5 note. Delighted with the money, the driver responded, "Frig the Prime Minister. What's the address, Gov?" President Kennedy said of Churchill, "He mobilized the English language and sent it into battle." On animals, Churchill said, "I like pigs. Dogs look up to us. Cats look down to us. But pigs treat us as equals." He commented on Clement Attlee, his wartime deputy, "A sheep in sheep's clothing." He also said, "An empty taxi arrived at 10 Downing Street and outstepped Attlee." For a while, Churchill's daughter Sarah was married to comedian Vic Oliver. He was not considered a good match by the family, and the couple later divorced. Oliver, over dinner, asked Churchill, "Who, in your opinion, was the greatest statesman you ever met?" To which Churchill replied, "Mussolini. He was the only man I ever knew who had the guts to have his son-in-law executed." His son-in-law had been the Italian foreign minister. He said on Chamberlain, "He always played the game and lost." And on Neville Chamberlain, "An old town clerk looking at European affairs through the wrong end of a municipal drainpipe." Bevin said of Churchill, "He was a man suffering from petrified adolescence." Churchill said of Rams MacDonald, "More than any other man, he had the gift of compressing the largest amount of words into the smallest amount of thoughts." On Arthur Balfour, "If you wanted nothing done, Arthur Balfour was your man." But Balfour said of Churchill, "I thought he was a young man of promise. I now find that he was a young man of promises." On Sir Cedric Hardwicke, the actor, At reception, the actor was introduced to Winston. He said, "I'm honoured to learn that I'm one of your favourite actors." "Yes," growled Churchill. "The other four are the Marx Brothers." On Sir Stafford Cripps. "He has all the virtues I dislike, and none of the vices I admire." In 1940, Cripps was ambassador to Russia. Churchill said, "A lunatic in a land of lunatics." I'd like to quote Churchill at this time. "Love of traditions has never weakened a nation. Instead, it has strengthened a nation in time of peril. All great things are simple and may be expressed in single words: freedom, justice, honour, duty." It has been said that democracy is the worst form of government, except all the others have been tried. And it's a mistake to look too far ahead. The chain of destiny can only be grasped one link at a time. And men stumble over the truth. Most of them pick themselves up and hurry on as if nothing had happened. He also said, "I've taken more out of drink than drink has taken out of me." And lies go around the world, and the worst of it is that most of them are true. The price of greatness is responsibility. And when I look back on all those worries, I remember the story of the old man who said on his deathbed, "I've had many worries, most of which never happened." And there was an exchange between George Bernard Shaw and Churchill. Shaw: "I'm reserving 2 tickets for my premiere. Come bring a friend, if you have one." Churchill's reply: "Impossible to be present for the first performance. Will attend for the second performance, if there is one." When Churchill was visiting a barrage balloon factory, he took out and lit out one of his famous Havana cigars. A young fire officer ran up. "Sir, you cannot smoke." Churchill's response: "Don't worry, dear boy, I don't inhale." Churchill was at a reception and was talking with the US Secretary of State, John Foster Dulles. Dulles pointed to Winston's ample tummy and inquired if he was in the family way, to which Churchill replied, "Well, if I am, and it's a boy, I shall call him after our greatest king, King Alfred. If it's a girl, I shall call her after our greatest queen, Elizabeth. But if it's wind, which I suspect it is, I shall call it John Foster Dulles." Thank you for your attention. To conclude, I would ask you to listen to a short extract from Churchill's victory speech of 1945.
This is your victory. Victory of the cause of freedom is every day. In all our long history, we have never seen a greater day than this. Everyone, man or woman, has done their bit. Everyone has tried, none has flinched. Neither the long years, nor the dangers, nor the fierce attacks of the enemy have in any way weakened the unbending resolve of the British nation. God bless you all.
I sincerely hope that you have enjoyed my talk. On the conclusion of my talks, I like to present printed extracts of the subject, which it is now my pleasure to make available to you. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your attention.